Welcome to Inside the City with YVC Muskogee. I'm Adriana. Here with
Isaiah.
And I'm Kendall Francis, Muskogee City Manager.
As volunteers, one thing we learn is that it is possible to disagree respectfully. City council meetings can involve difficult topics and strong emotions. What advice would you give young people about expressing disagreement while still showing respect to others?
Wow, that's a really good question, and that's something we've experienced here recently. City council meetings with a lot of emotion on difficult subjects. I think maybe the first thing I would tell you is that over the course of my career, I've kind of learned, probably the hard way, that it's always better to think before you speak, um, and to listen. Listen with the intent to hear and not to respond.
Mhm.
They always say God gave you two ears and only one mouth, so listen twice as much as you want to speak. But I'll be honest, some of that comes with a little bit of maturity, both just physical maturity, but mental maturity of having to experience that because everybody is, emotions run high. There's just some things that I've learned just doing this job, and that I always try to remember that, to kind of put myself in those people's shoes to understand their point of view, be empathetic for what they may be experiencing and why they're upset, depending on the situation. Sometimes people um, just want to be heard and understood, and they're angry, but not specifically at me or someone else. But it gets directed at us, or and so I think I would tell you uh, to practice empathy, to learn empathy, to be able to understand what that other person is going through. Also, acknowledge if they have legitimate complaints or legitimate, if their feelings are legitimate, acknowledge that because that's how the golden rule: treat others like you want to be treated.
Mhm.
And so I try very hard to do that. But usually, and if you go back and watch some of these council meetings, you'll notice a lot of times I don't say a lot. But I am actively listening, and but I don't want to put my foot in it, so to speak, and speak out of turn. I want to make sure that I've clearly heard everybody and understood what the issue is, why they're upset, and and then to move on from there.
Mhm. Leadership isn't always about making easy decisions. How do you stay calm and professional when conversations become emotional or people disagree with you?
That's a good question. Kind of along the same lines. Um, I will tell you, I've kind of learned some tricks um, as I've progressed in my career. Um, I used to be a college baseball umpire. So for about 20 years, I umpired baseball, and I learned a lot of tricks, so to speak, um, from that profession that I've been able to carry with me because there's a lot of heated moments during that.
Mhm.
So some of the things that I've learned is to first of all present myself in a non-threatening manner. Body language speaks a lot. If you physically pull back from a situation, give the other person space. So like if you and I were talking, I'd want to step back
Yeah.
and I don't want to present myself in an aggressive manner. You might see me fold my arms or put my arms down like that, so I don't look like I'm trying to be confrontational. But again, like the other question, I do a lot of listening, um, and I'm not always perfect at it, but I really try to listen to hear and not with the intent to respond immediately. I want to give you the opportunity to say what's on your heart, and so again. I think a lot of times confrontation comes because people just want to be heard and they feel ignored or something like that, especially in a government situation where we deal with a lot of constituents, and maybe I might have been the fourth or fifth person that they've tried to give their complaint to, and for whatever reason they've been passed along or something, so they're frustrated or don't feel like we're responding. So again, empathy, put myself in their situations. um, I I really try not to do anything confrontational in a public setting. I'll invite people. How about if they catch me, it's a very public job. They'll catch me at Walmart or on the sidewalk, and I'll say, let's schedule a time. Come to my office. Let's talk about this because I don't want to have that scenario out in public because that just kind of can exacerbate situations like that, and so those are like some of the little techniques that I've learned through my career to help diffuse those situations. Again, it really goes back to listening, empathy, and in the end, I'm trying to find a win-win solution. You know, Again, if someone has a complaint and it's legitimate, I'll let them know that you're right, that is a legitimate complaint, and here's what I'm prepared to be able to help do, and um, but in the end, I want to try to find a win-win solution.
Hmm. As volunteers, we attend city council meetings to learn about local government. What do you hope they learn not just from the decisions that are made, but also from the way the public officials conduct themselves?
Wow. I would hope that you would learn that people can disagree and not be disagreeable.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the city council, they're faced with a lot of tough scenarios, um, too many to really even name. And you've come to a lot of meetings, and you see that we deal with a lot of different issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that you could see that reasonable adults can present themselves professionally. They will not necessarily have to see eye to eye, but they're willing to understand the other person's point of view. Sometimes you agree to disagree,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak. There's really no reason for um, a breakdown in decorum in those meetings. They should be conducted professionally, and I know that our city council desires to have that type of professional atmosphere. Sometimes emotions get heated, and we say things we might regret or wish we'd have said in a different way. But in the end, I really think the people watching our meetings understand that it's okay to disagree, but you can do that in a respectful and a professional manner.
Mm-hmm. When community members are passionate about an issue, how can you make sure their voices are heard while still helping create productive conversations?
You guys came loaded with good questions today. We had a recent city council meeting that was on a very emotional topic, um, and we had literally hundreds of people show up to the meeting, and they wanted to be heard, and they wanted their opinions to be known. That's good, and we encourage that. I really do encourage people to come and take advantage of the mechanism we have for people to speak to the council, and to have their voices heard.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have to understand that we're doing business, and we do want them to be heard, but we also need to make sure that we're focusing that conversation directly on the item at hand. Sometimes it's easy for emotions to start taking over, and you go down a different pathway that's really not germane to the discussion. Being a human, you have those emotions. You want to let those people have their say, but at the same time, being able to respectfully say, we need to stay on focus. Here's what the meeting is about. Yes, your opinions do matter, your feelings matter, but they're really not on topic. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a balancing act, and sometimes we do pretty good at that. Other times we have rooms for improvement.
What advice would you give a person about participating in public discussions, especially when emotions are running high?
We are not required to have a public comment period. That's not what the law doesn't require that, but that's something our city council has chosen to do because they truly do want public input. They want to hear what people have to say. Not everybody's a public speaker. I encourage them to write it down and read it because that helps them stay focused, helps keep emotions out of it. It allows you to get your point across in a very succinct manner. So that's one thing I would tell people. If you're hesitant to come up and speak, write it down. There's no shame in reading your remarks. That gives you time to put some thought into what you say, so you know you hit all of the relevant points. Plus, again, you don't get so emotionally worked up that your mind kind of wanders.
If a young person wanted to advocate for something they care deeply about, what would you say is the most effective way to make their voice heard?
Coming to city council is one way. I don't know if it's always the most effective way. You got 5 minutes with the decision makers of our community. Direct communication, email, written response, because that's something that council members are able to look at, read, reread, digest, to make sure that they understand. Sometimes putting those thoughts in writing into an email to help you expound on your points and give clarifications can be a good way to do that. Those are a couple of good ways if you're passionate about something to have your voice heard.
What factors does the city consider before deciding that a building be demolished instead of repaired?
Oh wow, that's a lot of things. I'll take probably the most high profile and most recent one would be the old Muskogee Hotel, right there on the corner of Main and Broadway. So that building had a lot of sentimental value to citizens. It was historic in nature. A lot of people had a history there and had a lot of good memories about it. Unfortunately, it had fallen into substantial disrepair to the point that it had become life safety issues. In fact, it would have frequent fires inside, whether, I'm not always sure what the cause of those were, but we got to the point that it was so unsafe that firefighters would no longer enter the building because interior floors were collapsing and things like that. So it wasn't safe for my staff to risk their lives to go into. We have been working with the owner of this building for many, many months, but there are laws and due process that we have to make sure we follow when we're addressing his issues, because we can't just say, well, that building's ugly, let's tear it down. We have to have experts provide evidence that it's structurally unsafe, that it becomes a life safety issue. I think any reasonable person would look at that and understand that the cost, if they truly knew the extent of the damage, the cost to go in and renovate that building far out exceed the price to tear it down and build a brand new, modern building right there. Tear down a lot of other buildings, typically like old homes or dilapidated structures that maybe have caught fire, or burned down or something like that. And there's still processes that have to take place. If I owned a home and it burned to the ground, that doesn't give the city the right to go in and bulldoze it and clear it out. Private property owners have rights. So the city has very strict due policies and procedures that we have to follow as far as notification to these individuals, giving them a chance to appeal our decisions. And we have several boards, several steps that it has to go to. We want to make sure that the private property owners have due process and have every opportunity to correct the situation before we demolish a building.
What are the long-term benefits of rezoning property for industrial use?
Okay, so long-term benefits, it's job creation, expanding our sales tax base, because bringing in new jobs and more income into the community. Additional property tax for the county, because rezoning the property to industrial means that that's the only thing that can develop there is industry, like heavy industry, and so that typically means jobs, and so that's really what when we're talking about long-term benefit, that's probably what would be the long-term benefit.
Speaking of jobs, how does the city balance creating jobs with protecting nearby neighborhoods and the environment?
But yeah, that could be a tough one. And we had a recent rezoning item come to the city council. My staff actually recommended that we not allow the zoning change because they felt that the business that wanted to relocate to this specific property, it wasn't very aesthetically pleasing for the neighborhood. It didn't comply with our newly approved land use map. In the end, City Council overruled that and said that they didn't think that the proposed business would have that much of a negative effect. But
How does the Economic Development Fund directly benefit people who live in Muskogee, especially young people?
we have an agreement with City County Port Authority. This is kind of a long-winded answer to this, but kind of got to give you the background for you to understand the purpose of this fund. This fund was created so that we would have monies available to do industrial recruitment. So that means we'd have monies to for site readiness to like take a piece of land and develop it and bring in water and different electrical infrastructure, things like that. Or if we needed more land to bring in a large industry, we'd have a fund set aside that we'd have monies to purchase that land or do other things that are help entice a company to move to Muskogee. It benefits you because we're creating a situation where businesses want to come to Muskogee to create jobs. It's going to create other opportunities for income, disposable income for people. All of those things are positives because then they're buying things here and spending sales tax. They're doing all of these things. Housing needs to be created for all these people coming to get the new jobs. So it has a maybe not a direct benefit. Isaiah's not going to get a check from the industrial fund, you know, but as we bring in some of these companies that are very community oriented, community minded, maybe such a time that they would want to donate money to YVC to do a project, you know, for YVC or something like that. So it's not probably a direct benefit to the youth other than maybe the monies coming into the community allow us to make improvements to whether it's the parks, hat box, the event centers, the water park, things like that, that everybody can take advantage of.
What prompted the city to update the dangerous animal ordinance, and what should residents know about the changes?
That was really just pretty procedural. Um, we didn't do anything substantial to the ordinance. We just needed to add some wording that allowed us to better enforce the state regulations. And this was something that our municipal judge asked us to tweak the language a little bit so it allow him in his position to properly enforce the ordinance. As state laws change, sometimes our ordinances need to change or be updated to make sure that they comply with state law and to make sure that judges can enforce what we have in place.
When the state makes or changes an ordinance, how long does the city have to update the city ordinance?
That varies. It's imperative that I and my staff are monitoring what happens with the changes in the law. I don't know that there's a specific time frame, but you usually try to do it as quickly as you can.
How do tourism grants help Muskogee, and what types of projects usually receive this funding?
That's a really good question. A bit of backstory. Tourism is funded by a tax placed on hotel and motel rooms. So anybody comes and stays a night in a hotel room here, there's an additional little tax that is charged to that room stay, and that money is what comes into the city for, and we use that for tourism. Nearly every city has that same type of tax. So take that money and then it funds our tourism department that helps create events throughout Muskogee. A lot of the concerts and other things that you see at the Civic Center are help funded through that. Things out at the Hatbox Event Center, those funds are used to help run those types of events. The Roxy Theater. We also give grants to some of our other partners, Three Rivers Museum, the War Memorial, which is the Batfish Submarine, Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame. Then we have smaller grants that allows some of these smaller events to get some funds to help them start up. Gives us more things to do within the community, but then it helps regenerate that fund so that we can keep having tourism.
If you wanted young people to pay attention to just one item on the agenda at the city council meeting held Monday, which would it be and why?
Probably the one that I would tell you had to do with the question you asked earlier about the Industrial Economic Development Fund. The agreement that we passed and the partnership that we have with the port is extremely important for the city and has the ability to have long-lasting positive impact for the city. And so all the things we discussed that night, that's probably the one I would tell you to look out for. Next meeting, I don't have all of those down yet, but there's going to be an item on there that involves the old teen center, and it has the ability to impact the community and impact the youth. That if the proposal goes through, it'd be something that you guys should pay attention to. So.
When you think about Muskogee 10 years from now, what's one thing you hope people will say about our community?
Wow. I would hope they'd talk about the pride that the citizens had in our community and the desire to grow and improve. I think I'd want them to say that they were progressive thinking. Hopefully we achieve something in that 10 years that would would be memorable. I want to see the pride in Muskogee increase. There's a lot of things to be excited about in Muskogee and a lot of things to be proud about, and the people sometimes that live here sometimes don't see that or forget about it, take it for granted, those types of things. So I just hope that 10 years from now I can say, we didn't take it for granted, and we really were excited to live here.
Yeah. Okay, and this is the last question. If you could leave our listeners with one challenge to make Muskogee a better place this week, what would it be?
Volunteer, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the answer, but it's to get engaged, be a part of what's happening, have your opinions heard. Your voice does matter. When we're making these big decisions, council wants to hear from the constituents, but don't just sit back and let things happen to you. Be a part of actively being engaged and trying to make change for the better.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I had today.
We would like to thank Mr. Francis for joining us again today and always being such a great advocate for the youth of Muskogee. Remember, stay involved, stay connected, and keep using your voice.